Hello everyone out there in the entertainment world. This is B-Spec / SpecSun coming to you live here in beautiful Spartanburg, South Carolina for Spec Commentaries 14. It's the first edition of Spec Commentaries to be featured on the DangerousAlliance.com, and I'd like to thank all the peeps and peepettes out there who have contributed to the page, who have listened to the first couple of episodes of the DA radio, and it's been a very long and continuously growing story here with the Dangerous Alliance, which basically, if you have not heard or do not know necessarily of the group, we are a dedicated group of wrestling fans who support independent wrestling. We want to get the word out there for independent wrestling, but we are very passionate about professional wrestling in general. Notice we don't say sports entertainment. We're not going to. We do say pro wrestling. We're old school in that regard, and we truly feel that professional wrestling is the best form of entertainment out there. And through our insights, through our podcasts, through our radio programmings, through our commentaries, and also through our appearances at live independent wrestling shows and mainstream shows in WWE and TNA, we are spreading the word out there, not only about ourselves, but about the world of professional wrestling and our passion for it. So I'd like to thank each and every one of you out there who are listening to this for the first time, and also those who have been dedicated fans of ours and also professional wrestling throughout the ages. So thank you very much for tuning in. For those who do not know necessarily about Spec Commentaries, Spec Commentaries debuted in 2011 through the B-Spec Productions brand, my current company. And I debuted on allhwrestling.com and also on youtube.com, and I am still airing the programming out there as well, but I'm just getting the DA moniker out there right now for each and every one of you to get a little educated about our group. But Spec Commentaries is essentially a 10 to 15 minute discussion in which I, B-Spec / SpecSun, will discuss a particular issue in the world of professional wrestling or throughout the world of entertainment specifically. I have done episodes regarding the NCAA, college football topics, such as Charlie Weiss when he became the offensive coordinator for the Florida Gators. Obviously, that's no more. I have done episodes ranging towards the WWE within their supposedly, and haven't even debuted yet, WWE Network, which looks really ill-fated at this point. But I've done a lot of different topics regarding not just one segment of entertainment, but this particular episode of Spec Commentaries will deal with TNA Impact Wrestling. For those of you who do know TNA, and those of you who may not know TNA, just think of it. It is a professional wrestling organization out there. TNA Wrestling debuted in 2002. It's been around now for 11 years. And so I have absolutely no problems whatsoever criticizing it, although it hasn't been a company of a lot longevity compared to World Wrestling Entertainment that's been around for over 40, 50 plus years. But recently a hot topic has emerged in the world of wrestling, and specifically through TNA's / budget cuts. TNA, over the last 24 hours, has decided to part ways with several of their young talents that have been in the company for a few years, and some talents that have only been in the company for a few months, who did show signs of a promise, but because of the company's, and I will get to this very soon, the company's stance on budget cuts, they decided to either release talents or not re-up on contracts that did expire. But on this edition of Spec Commentaries, the 14th edition, I will be discussing TNA's budget cuts / super cuts, as I have appropriately named it, not necessarily in terms of the national chain that actually cuts the hair, but a little cute and appropriate assessment of the current situation going on in TNA. I normally will break down a Spec Commentaries episode into 5 different categories or 5 different topics, and the key topics in which I will discuss during this episode are the following. First, the releases and the same old song. Second, life after TNA Impact Wrestling, followed by questionable talent relations, which is the third key topic. The fourth key topic, problems with Ohio Valley Wrestling. That's right. A lot of news today has been coming out in regards to Ohio Valley Wrestling. And for those who do not know, Ohio Valley Wrestling / OVW was the developmental territory for WWE for quite some time, with Jim Cornette and Danny Davis running the scene, eventually followed by current WWE talent Paul Heyman and former ECW owner. And TNA, over the last year and a half or so, has now become the official place in which their talent will be developed at that location in Ohio Valley Wrestling. The fifth key topic, a lack of faith for the young talent. And that's something I'm really going to harp on during this edition of Spec Commentaries. As pretty much a huge fan of TNA Wrestling. I've been a fan of TNA Wrestling ever since its inception on on national pay-per-view, which you could only see the shows back then on pay-per-view around 2002, 2003. TNA Wrestling, to me, is a company that really shouldn't even be at its current spot right now, given all of the obstacles that they have had to overcome over the years. But it's mistakes in which they have made that really has me scratching my head in regards to the organization. Now, just to give you a perspective on TNA Wrestling and the current scene right now, which has been taking place for several years, TNA is pretty much owned and operated by Dixie Carter, and she has now, over the last 3 or 4 years now, has brought in a lot of the older talent to be the stable of their organization. Guys like Eric Bischoff, who was the former vice president executive vice president, of World Championship Wrestling during their period in the mid to late 90s, and Hulk Hogan as well was brought in, who is, if you don't know who Hulk Hogan is, I mean, I don't know what rock you're living under, but Hulk Hogan is one of the most popular names ever to grace the sport of professional wrestling, but he's been in TNA for quite some time too, and some might even argue, including myself, that he's past his prime in terms of being a very high-profile figure on a television program in which a lot of the younger talent is also showcased. Moreover, you have a guy by the name of Sting, who is one of the all-time greats as well, one of the most popular wrestlers of all time. Kurt Angle, who can still go in the ring, is a phenomenal talent and recently been inducted into the TNA Hall of Fame. And you have countless others as well that will venture in and out. But those are pretty much the stable of the older guys who are in TNA Wrestling, including Bully Ray, Devon. I can go on and on and on. The stable guys that are currently in the promotion have been guys who have been huge stars over the last 10, in some cases 20 to 30 years. But TNA has been a company that has dwelled very heavily on those guys for about the last 7 to 8 years in terms of older talent, whether it be old WWE talent coming in or WCW talent coming in to be the main staples of the company. Within that whole spectrum, you have younger guys such as AJ Styles, such as Samoa Joe, such as America's Most Wanted over the years, Bobby Roode, who have been influxed into the storylines of the company. Shucks, I didn't even mention Jeff Hardy, who was also brought in as an older WWE talent. But TNA has occasionally over the years brought in a lot of even younger guys who haven't been staples of the company, and girls as well, / knockouts, who seem to have promise. But instead of pushing them at a very consistent rate, TNA has been very inconsistent in that regard. And that leads me to the key topic number one of this whole TNA Supercuts thing that has been going on for the last 24 hours. It's the specific releases that were announced via the internet yesterday. Yesterday, specifically on the 3rd of July 2013. It was reported, PW Insider reported this a little bit earlier during the day, that TNA released Knockout Taylor Hendricks, Gut Check star Sam Shaw, Joey Ryan, Christian York, Crimson, who had been a part of the company for several years and also pushed heavily with the likes of a Matt Morgan and Hulk Hogan. And also, it was reported that Madison Rayne, who is currently pregnant with her first child, has been not necessarily been released, but her contract expired and was not re-upped by TNA Wrestling. Further details have not been reported at this time as to what was the specific reasoning by not re-signing Madison Rayne, but right now it doesn't look really cool for TNA to not re-sign a lady who has been a very influential part of their knockouts division over the last several years, despite her first pregnancy right now. It's not pretty cool. I kind of got the same feeling when Karma was released / Awesome. When she was released by the WWE, I think it was last year, I believe, was when it occurred. Still real weird. But those releases today / not re-upping the contracts of some of the talents was a very, very puzzling thing to me, and it still is, quite frankly. I commercially viewed a guy like a Joey Ryan with a lot of promise. He was a pretty cool young mid-card heel, and immediately you could tell, at least I could tell, that he was something special. He was something that you had to look at. He captured the audience's attention, and that's something that you don't see often from a lot of the younger talents. Anybody can go out there with a nice body, or in Joey's case, a very sleazy body, and point to the whole world that you're the best in the world, that you're the best thing going, and smile and just prance to the crowd. But it's another thing to evoke realism and also personality within your character that makes you stand out, makes you look different. That is something that Joey Ryan did, not only in terms of his storyline with Al Snow during the gut check portions, but also during his time when he moved out of the gut check. He teamed up with several different people on the roster to really even further stand himself out. And he was even the referee once for the Knockouts division, and he even showcased that personality right there. Joey Ryan, to me, isn't somebody that's going to be a world heavyweight champion, but he is somebody that can be a very stable mid-card heel for you and get somebody else over based on his actions. So that was a huge, huge mistake by TNA by letting him go. And the next person I wanted to discuss was Taylor Hendricks. An absolute fantastic body on that girl. She's very beautiful. She's very personable. She can work in the ring. She's not the best worker in the world, but she has personality. She can move in the ring. She can execute maneuvers, and she can get over. But she had potential as well. I point to her match with Mickie James prior to very shortly after Mickie had won the Knockouts Championship, and it was a pretty darn good, decent match. Obviously, Mickie James was calling the match, but to me, she looked like she belonged. Why would you get rid of somebody like that? It just doesn't make much sense. And the second person I want to talk about in regards to being released would definitely have to be Crimson. I did touch on this a little bit earlier on the program. When Crimson first debuted, he had the look, he had the size, but he was green. But over the course of several months, even during the Bound to Glory series over the years, his feud with Matt Morgan, his feuds with Samoa Joe, and even had a little run in there with Kurt Angle, it looked like they were going to treat this guy seriously and that he was somebody to be reckoned with, and somebody that the company was definitely going to be pushing throughout the years. But over the last year and a half, you haven't heard much of Crimson. And this is another problem I have with TNA, the inconsistencies of the pushes. And yet you want to try to justify the releases by budget cuts. It's just a very, very sad situation to me to let go of somebody like Crimson who you were building. So to me, it's just a complete waste of energy. The whole build was a waste of time for your company. But for Crimson, for Joey Ryan, for the Taylor Hendrickses of the world, the only thing I have to say, and this is also going to move into my second discussion, in which life after TNA Impact Wrestling. You've built your names through TNA Wrestling. Not a whole lot of people have seen it compared to the WWE, but some people have. You have gotten your name out there through internet and social media. I would say just continue to strive for the best. And there are independent organizations out there who will more than gladly, and trust me, as an independent wrestling fan myself, I would more than gladly like to see each and every one of you on one of those cards. So keep striving for the best. And I guess the next step for you, to, in my opinion, would be after trying to strive for the best in TNA Wrestling, excuse me, in independent wrestling world, try to test your waters and see if the WWE has any interest for you. I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt, their developmental system is a whole heck of a lot better than TNA is at the current moment, in which I will get to very shortly. And going to the third topic, the questionable talent relations. And this is going to be a very, very key topic in which I will discuss in regards to TNA Supercuts today within the 5 key topics. The reason why you're seeing a whole lot of these releases and hearing a lot about them and contracts not being re-up is because of the questionable talent relations. It's the balancing of the old with the new. How longer are you going to be sticking with Hulk Hogan? How long are you going to be sticking with Sting, especially since at the present time of this recording that it has been reported that Sting and the WWE has now, their interest has not only been mutually even more sufficient over the last few weeks, but if the reports are true, Sting is highly considering leaving TNA when his contract expires, or even before that if he can. The interest is really building. I don't know how much validity there is to that, especially since Sting is still, after all these years, a very prominent member of the TNA roster, and he even recently gone into its Hall of Fame last year. I do worry that over pushing people like Sting in prominent roles who may not be there that much longer, pushing guys like Hulk Hogan who really should not be the major focus of the show, even though he's a big name. You have proven that you're not really moving the ball forward with a guy like Hulk Hogan, despite his big name and popularity. And you also look at several other of the older talents, the Kurt Angles of the world, the Bully Rays, who I think is fantastic. I like Bully Ray, but he is an older guy as well. You look at the Devons of the world too, Jeff Hardy's. If these guys are going to be your prominent players, how are you going to be building new talent? And it looks like the only talent that they're continually trying to shuffle will be Austin Aries, Bobby Roode, and James Storm, who I really like a lot. But are you going to start making new stars through those guys and not necessarily through the older guys who have been there the longest and have proven that they're not necessarily moving the ball as forward as you might like? How complacent do you really want to be? I do know TNA has done a lot of great changes in regards to moving to moving their live events to different buildings. They have officially moved out of the Impact Zone. Now they're on the road. I understand going on the road presents a lot of expenditures that you have to consider, and you also have to realize that you may need to cut certain talents. My major concern is, why not get rid of some of those well-known big brand names who's not really moving the pendulum as farther as you might like? To me, I think they need to start thinking about cutting the costs with the bigger names and a whole heck of a lot less on cutting the people that are really worth chump change compared to what they're making. When I look at TNA's management, and that's exactly what it is. It's the management in regards to the questionable talent relations. They have been experiencing a lot of turmoil within their creative team. former WWE writers coming over to start becoming very prominent members of their creative team. The influx of Vince Russo on and off within several years. Jim Cornette coming in. You're putting Jim Cornette with Vince Russo back and forth. Currently, you bring in Al Snow as a road agent. You have D'Lo Brown as a road agent as well. All of a sudden, he's written off TV too. And also Bruce Pritchard, who plays a very key role, and Eric Bischoff. They have gone through a lot of change over the last year alone, not even touching on the last 5, 10, 12 years. 5 or 10 years. They have gone through a lot of change, and there's not a lot of stability in key managerial roles in the company. It would be nice if they had one vision, one person to go to, instead of having a plethora amount of people with different visions. And that really speaks volumes towards the budget cuts that we have seen over the last several years, and even last night in regards to TNA. They're cutting, to me, the wrong people and not necessarily the right people to make the product a whole heck of a lot better. So that's one thing that you got to keep in mind when you're looking at these so-called supercuts. Questionable talent relations. How better can I micromanage and macromanage my company, my brand, my talent through the personnel that I'm hiring as managers of my company and of my brand? Am I going to stick with that one vision, or am I going to panic and try to seek another vision immediately? This isn't, and as much as I love the territorial system, you can't run an organization like a territorial system in which you'll bring in a new booker every 2 to 3 months if you don't necessarily like what they're doing as a promoter. You got to have more stability, since you're dealing with cable television, when you're dealing with satellite television, internet, social media sites. You got to do a whole better job micromanaging and macromanaging your brand, and that comes with understanding your talent and understanding your current budget and how to actually use that budget the best way possible to make your product the best. You don't necessarily cut the young guys with the potential. You should start looking at some of the bigger names who aren't contributing as much, and you're paying a pretty hefty fee. The problem with TNA is, as from a fan perspective, we don't necessarily know how much money they're actually garnering towards the talent in the contract, since they're not released publicly. The fourth key topic here I'm going to discuss in regards to the cuts at TNA is problems with Ohio Valley Wrestling. And I did mention this a little bit a while ago in regards to OVW being the official developmental system of TNA Wrestling. You take that for what it's worth. I'm not necessarily sure how much work is being done there, but there has been a ton of talks in regards to OVW over the last 24 hours that there has been major issues going on with the company. Apparently, TNA is having a difficult time in terms of the financing of the company. Of their relationship with OVW, and a lot of that does stem from Rip Rogers, the former pro wrestling, I shouldn't say great, but former pro wrestling talent, who was pretty much a journeyman in a lot of regards throughout the 1980s and also the early 1990s in the world of pro wrestling and during the independent organizations, WCW and whatnot. Apparently, according to a direct source in OVW, the TNA/OVW trainee Rip Rogers was reportedly trying to extort money from the company. According to the report by WrestleZone.com, Nick Paglino, they were told that he wanted to get paid from trainees for their instruction in the advanced class. Now, if you don't know that much about OVW and TNA, and supposedly not a lot of people do, there's two different class sets within the structure of OVW and how they train their prospective wrestlers. You have the advanced class, which is the #1 class, and mostly that consists of a lot of the journeymen, independent wrestlers, and journeywomen who have been out there for a while, who really know the ring ropes of pro wrestling, but TNA is trying to mold them into a character that they like. And then you have the lower class, the intermediate classes, and that intermediate class was the class that would be promoted into the advanced class. I don't know what the time frame was through that, but that's exactly how the structuring of the company, of the whole training developmental holding in TNA is going right now. But Rip Rogers was trying to extort money from OVW, and that has been costing OVW a whole lot of cred and TNA a whole lot of cred, and this report has officially been released online for everybody to see. So it really isn't good at all for TNA, and it doesn't speak well in terms of their whole budget cut situation. But Rip Rogers was trying to get trainees for their instruction in the advanced class to pay him to be in the class. And that's, I think, one of the reasons why Scrap Iron Adam Pearce, former NWA World Heavyweight Champion, wanted no part of OVW. He didn't need OVW, and I think anybody who has seen Adam Pearce work, and I have personally on several different occasions, live events and on TV, that guy doesn't need gut check, and a lot of the other guys don't need gut check or OVW as well to be sent to developmental. But I believe Crimson was in the developmental too, and he was one of those guys that got caught, that got released, but it didn't necessarily need to be. But bottom line, though, with this subtopic with OVW is that it's a black mark for TNA in terms of the internet sites out there and fans just discussing TNA through word of mouth, because that's how TNA gets a lot of their publicity, through word of mouth, through its fans. So it's not good that an OVW trainer is trying to extort money from the talent and from the organization, and at the same time TNA is trying to do budget cuts, and you're cutting that talent that's being trained. To me, it looks like because you're not paying Rip Rogers, you're getting released, or because TNA is strong with cash, although they're owned by a multi-million-dollar conglomerate. They're going to cut the lower talent. To me, it's just crazy. But that's currently what's going on with OVW right now. To me, I think the whole developmental system in OVW is a joke. Shouldn't have never occurred to begin with. They're not WWE, so stop trying to do WWE stuff. OVW is not Florida Championship Wrestling, so stop trying to make it FCW. It's not FCW. In TNA, you're not big enough yet, and you don't even take care of your younger talent as much as you should do on your main organization, TNA Impact Wrestling. So how in the world am I, as a fan, going to think that you're going to do the same thing in Ohio Valley Wrestling? To me, that's ridiculous, but that's my take on it. OVW, the whole idea was a mistake. Move on. In the fifth and final topic here on my edition of Spec Commentaries 14, TNA Supercuts, will be a lack of faith for the young talent. And that's continuing on to what I've been stating, really as a big central theme for this entire episode of Spec Commentaries. When you have young talent, and that emphasis, the key word isn't young, the key word is talent. When you have talent, and it happens to be young talent, you don't want to depart from that, especially if that young talent has a unique skill set or has something about them that makes people care, like a Joey Ryan. Crimson in his look, his demeanor, his ability to get better over time. Same thing goes with Taylor Hendricks. Whenever she got TV time, she made the best out of it. Her look, her physical abilities inside the ring, the fact that she can put a decent match together with somebody without having all these crazy botches and stuff. People that have been involved in pro wrestling for several years during the independent circuit should start be giving chances to shine in TNA wrestling. TNA wrestling, for all of it is, and I think they're trying their best in some regards, but there's too much focus, way too much focus on the older talent that have already been established elsewhere, and not enough focus on talent that has tried to make a name for themselves in the independent circuit. Finally getting their chance on the national television program, they should be giving better and more sufficient opportunities. And when you push them, don't just half-do it. Don't half-ass it. If you're going to push them, make sure you're doing it very strategically and you're very committed to doing it. Because when you give up on a talent, if you give up on a push, it's going to be very hard for that younger talent to get back to the level in which they were before you had de-pushed them. So you got to really zone in and understand who you want to push, and also which young talent do you feel can take that next step to greatness. But they can never take that next step to greatness unless you give them an opportunity and a shot. TNA would do a whole lot better for themselves to end this Aces and Eights stuff. Get rid of guys like a Devon, get rid of guys like a Doc or whatnot. A lot of these older guys who have come in through the system, who have been paid through this system, those are the guys you need to be releasing. You don't need to, and hopefully they won't release a guy like a Wes Briscoe or even a Garrett Bischoff at this point. I can't believe I'm saying this and putting him over, but Garrett Bischoff has showed a lot of promise since being a referee and positioning to where he is currently right now. There are a lot of young talent in TNA. Gunner's another guy who has been pushed, then de-pushed, and now he's starting to get pushed again as a World Tag Team Championship partner with former legendary Tag Team Champion, AMX Spear Money guy, James Storm. And he was Phil Shatter before he ever got to TNA, and he was fantastic then. Former NWA National Heavyweight Champion. You have to push these guys and gals seriously. And also I want to say all the best to Madison Rayne, who is having her first child, as I mentioned earlier in the show. Madison Rayne has been a fantastic worker. In my opinion, I think she's going to be back in TNA. I don't think this is I think this is very temporary. I also think that Angelina Love is going to be back in TNA at some point soon too. These are household names in the Knockouts division. I don't see the TNA departing from them for way too long. But then again, it's been quite some time since I've seen Madison. Since I've seen Madison Rayne, but since I've seen Angelina Love in a TNA wrestling ring. I was happy enough to see her at a Premier Wrestling Experience PWX show in Charlotte, North Carolina. It was really good seeing her. She's in great spirits, and hopefully she'll be back in the mainstream fairly soon. But I'm not complaining that she is wrestling independent. Love me some Angelina Love. But basically what I want each and every one of you to get out of this commentary right now on Spec Commentaries 14 is a general pictorial of TNA Wrestling and how they view younger talent in relation to budget cuts / talent releases. They don't necessarily tend to release bigger names. They would like to get as much as they possibly can at a very popular name out there, instead of looking at their deficiencies and looking at what they could actually bring to the product in relation to the younger talent that they bring in from the independent circuit, and seeing how they can help the company. But you're not going to get better as an organization by releasing young talent just for the sake of budget cuts. You're going to get a whole lot better if you have stability in management and you're able to use the talent that you currently have, old and new, and try to find a really good medium. But at the same time, always remembering to yourself, in order for me to have an organization for the future, I'm going to have to build that organization for the future around younger talent. But you establish younger talent by good managerial decisions and by having some older and established talent that are willing enough to put them over. And right now, there's not a balance right now going on in TNA. It's a very uneasy and unbalanced situation. When you get rid of a guy like a Joey Ryan, that's a red flag for me that you really don't necessarily know what you're doing or what you have. But it's been a very, very humbling experience doing the Spec Commentaries. All of these thoughts in my head over the years that I could have been doing this a whole lot sooner, but I am doing it right now. Once again, make sure you tune in to thedangerousalliance.com. It's a fantastic website. It's still up and going, and a lot of things are under construction. But right now, we do have 2 episodes of DA Radio featuring my good friends David Anderson and Adrian Rohr, who have been very, very, very proactive in this entire endeavor in the Dangerous Alliance. And I'd just like to say thank you for those guys for putting up 2 awesome shows already, and they are in counting. Expect a whole heck of a lot more content to be featured on the site. Also, make sure you tune into the Dangerous Alliance, not only the podcast with the DA Radio, but also more Spec Commentary episodes will be featured. And moreover, we do have the Facebook page as well on the Dangerous Alliance. Definitely go to the Facebook page. Just look under the Dangerous Alliance. It will be there. Already we're having a tremendous response of new likes on the page. We're well up over 100 now, and that's despite only being the site only being there for the new page being there for only about a week and a half, 2 weeks now. So that's a tremendous response for DA. We're also on Twitter as well, on the Dangerous Alliance. It's our Twitter handle. We are really promoting the site. We're promoting the brand name, and the brand name, as you can tell right now, if you're a fan of professional wrestling, it's in response to the Dangerous Alliance from WCW during the years of 1991 and 1992, paying homage to Paul E. Dangerously's group, the Dangerous Alliance, who do not get enough respect and not enough fanfare from the WWE and also from fans in general, as I would like to see. They were truly something special, and if you've never heard of them, definitely check them out. But my name is Spec Son, aka B-Spec, of The Secluded Paradigm and also of Spec Commentaries. Make sure you check out thedangerousalliance.com and also check out my page as well, which is B-Spec Productions. I'm going to have my own site up very shortly. I would say within the next 2 to 3 months that site will be up and running. And I do have a Facebook page as well through my company site, which is also increasing in numbers. Well over 300 likes right now, and I want to say thank you to everybody who's been out there supporting me since 2009. That's www.facebook.com/bspecprod. But thank you for listening to Spec Commentaries number 14, featuring TNA and their recent talent releases / not renewing contracts, which I have appropriately titled TNA Supercuts. Thanks, peeps and peepettes, and I hope to check you out next time on thedangerousalliance.com.